on the side of him. He fell down and he got shook. And I just stood on top of him, grabbed him. And next thing you know, NYPD was there.
Okay, so that situation happened. And then a bit after that, in Atlanta, Suge's best friend, Big Jake, gets killed in a club. And this part is kind of fuzzy, but there was a rumor that Wolf was the one that did it. Puffy got blamed for it, and so forth. But I guess Wolf wasn't the one who did it, but still there was some sort of blame that Suge had on Bad Boy over that situation, right?
I don't know if Suge had blamed Bad Boy for that, because the situation never came, when I got with him, the situation never came to us like that. Now, I've heard Wolf talk about it, and Wolf told me personally that he didn't do it. And I know everybody knew the guy who did it. It was this dude, he's dead now. He got killed in Atlanta about 2 or 3 years ago. His father was from the Bronx and he owned the cleaners. Now, did Wolf and them know him? Yeah, they probably knew him. He was from the Bronx, his part of town. His father owned the cleaners. They knew this guy. You understand? Him and Jake was arguing over this chick or whatever. Now, did Wolf do it? How could Wolf do it when he was next to Suge? He was right next to Suge when Jake got killed. But everybody want to say Wolf did it because that glamorized the situation.
Right. Okay. And then after that, Wolf actually reached out to you and asked you to come back to Bad Boy and help out with security.
Well, I told Wolf he had to straighten out his thing with Slick. We met on 125th Street, me, Slick, Rico, and Wolf. Him and Slick talked and everything, and it was cool and everything. So he said, yo, Gene, I need you to come because we need somebody who was in law enforcement or legal that could carry a gun and everything to be with us. He said, and if you ran after me, and this was his own words, because I didn't see it and I didn't know it at the time. You know, he said, if you ran after me and I had a gun in my hand, I want you on my team. I said, I don't fuck with Puff like that, bro. He said, from the city college here. He said, yo, you're going to have your own contract. You're going to have your own days. All you got to do is listen to me and make sure he good. I said, all right, man, we'll see. And that's when I went back.
Okay, so you joined the security team at Bad Boy with your own contract.
Right.
And Wolf was already over there, and Big Paul was over there as well.
Paul, yeah.
Yeah, Paulie. And Paulie was kind of Puffy's everyday guy?
Yeah, Paul was the guy who Puff helped him set up a security company, had him set up a security company. So he did the security at the house, the apartment building or whatever, and Sean John, and over at Bad Boy.
Diddy Combs has been denied bail in connection with the sexual abuse and sex trafficking charges he faces. And as Les Trent reports, the music mogul who once traveled by private jet to all those mansions is now in a jail that is notorious for its bad living conditions.
Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs spent his first night behind bars inside a facility that is being called Hell on Earth. The Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn is notorious for its appalling living conditions and rampant violence. How bad is it inside this federal lockup? There have been 2 murders, 4 suicides, and numerous stabbings and lockdowns in recent years. It's so out of control inside that 4 federal judges are reportedly refusing to send any more prisoners here. Donald Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, spent a harrowing year in federal custody. He says for someone used to a life of luxury like Diddy, prison life is a severe shock.
You have a desk, you have a plastic chair, you have your bed with a 1.5-inch mattress, no pillow, and you also have a locker. So you basically have 3 feet by 5 feet to move around. So you have a basic 15 square feet. It is a horrible place.
Diddy's lawyers were so eager to keep him out of jail, they offered his palatial $48 million home in Miami Beach and his private jets as bail. Today, they are even offering to restrict female visitors to his homes, except for his mother, daughters, and the mothers of his children if he is released. They told the judge the jail he was being sent to is dreadful, dirty, inhuman, and an ongoing tragedy.
How's your dad doing?
How's your dad doing? Family members appeared somber as they arrived at federal court in Manhattan today in another attempt to get out on bail. The judge cited Diddy's history of violent temper and potential intimidation of witnesses as reasons for keeping him behind bars. Diddy's former protege, singer Aubrey O'Day, is celebrating Diddy's downfall today. I feel validated, a win for women all over the world.
Combs has pled not guilty.
Diddy Combs back in a New York City courtroom, we believe right about now, as he tries to appeal a judge's ruling, which denied him bail and sent him to jail as he awaits trial in the explosive sex trafficking and racketeering case against him. Prosecutors describe a large criminal ring orchestrated by Combs to sexually abuse dozens of women, drugging them, beating them, and recording sexual acts for at least 15 years. The move from the judge to hold the musician mogul in jail before his trial comes as prosecutors argue Combs, his massive wealth, makes him a flight risk. And they're also accusing him of witness tampering, trying to keep both them, witnesses, and his victims silent. Combs' team offered a $50 million bond agreement, with its attorney claiming Combs is, in his words, eminently trustworthy. The judge didn't buy it. It is a stunning fall from the height of pop culture. Combs, however, is pleading not guilty and has denied any wrongdoing. Let's bring in NBC's Chloe Malas for more. And Chloe, there are no phones, no electronics allowed in court.
We actually have breaking news. We have some breaking news right now. According to NBC News, just moments ago, I'm reading off my phone right now, Sean Diddy Combs will not be released. And this is per the district attorney's office. So let me explain and silence my phone and break down what exactly that means, or else my kids will call me during this entire segment. So this basically means, Tom, that now Sean Diddy Combs sits behind bars until this potentially goes to trial. Why do I say potentially? Even though his attorney, Mark Agnifilo, spoke to CNN last night and said that it is very unlikely that he would accept any sort of a plea deal. And we don't even know if a plea deal would even be on the table with these very extreme criminal charges of racketeering, transportation when it comes to prostitution and sex trafficking. We do know that this could be potentially a year behind bars. I was talking to NBC's legal analyst and correspondent Laura Jarrett earlier today. And, you know, there's so many motions and, so much discovery to do, as you know, and you've covered things like this, I'm sure, that it takes a while to get ready for a big criminal trial like this when there's so many charges and so many different grand jury subpoenas and things like that. So currently, though, he is in jail. And that's what it is. Everybody asks me the difference between jail and prison. You go to prison after you've been found guilty. Right now, he's in jail, and he's in jail in Brooklyn. And this is one of the main issues that his legal team had, was that this detention center in Brooklyn has seen suicides. It saw somebody get killed over the summer, food contamination, overcrowding, and they listed all of this in their filing to the judge. But clearly, this federal judge was not persuaded, Tom. And so now that's it. He stays behind bars while he waits to have this tried in court.
A celebrity, that's an understatement. He is an icon. And what are the chances that he gets any sort of preferential or royal treatment in the jail? Or, given the charges that are so significant and serious against him, is he going to be treated like any other inmate?
That's incredibly hard to say, right? When you see, and I don't want to generalize here, but when you do see, let's say, accusations against minors, which we don't see in this indictment. You can sometimes see some of these high-profile alleged criminals maybe put into solitary confinement. Will he be treated like any other inmate while he's in this detention center in Brooklyn? It's sort of left to be seen. I think that over the coming weeks, we'll see what happens and what types of motions that his team files if they feel as though he is under immediate threat, or if he gets, beat up in prison or in jail. See, I made that mistake. If he gets beat up in jail, or if something like that happens, I guess maybe always things could change. I mean, look at Harvey Weinstein, for example. Not that I want to compare the two, but Harvey Weinstein has been been treated in a medical ward because he has all of these medical issues, right? And so the judge had decided even today that he can still stay in the medical ward. So again, I think it's a case-by-case basis, and we have to see how this all plays out. But let's just put it this way. Sean Diddy Combs is a billionaire. He achieved billionaire status in 2022. He is not going to be happy, Tom, being in jail. And this is a far cry from his multi-million dollar homes all across this country. So obviously it's a huge fall from grace for somebody that was such a pioneer in the music industry.
Yeah, but to your point, Chloe, if it were you or me, not suggesting either one of us would ever face these kinds of charges, but there is no way we'd be out on bail or bond, right? I mean, these are incredibly serious charges that could land him in prison for years and years and years, and they involve violence.
You are a potential defendant in one of these cases, and someone's suing you. Would they typically require a non-disclosure agreement to be signed once they settle it with the plaintiff or the victim in this case?
You know, if I was an attorney representing one of these individuals accused, I would certainly request for that before agreeing to any out-of-court settlement. Otherwise, it kind of takes away the point of doing it out of court. It's going to end up being public. I might as well continue to fight the allegations.
And sometimes, Catherine, when you're a victim in human trafficking or sex crimes like this, money can't always satisfy you. And do you foresee any of these individuals, whether it's men or women, coming forward later, even though they've signed the NDA, even though they've been paid, saying, look, it was me and this is who did it?
Well, after you get paid, right? Okay, and you done spent that money, and then you got to take care of the I, the R, and the S, who are real pimps, then they're gonna talk. You know, what's done in the dark comes to the light, and I know you don't have a 50-foot bed in your backyard, do you?
Don't assume too much.
I'm just trying to tell you. But it's interesting because I was, you know, I've been following it, and today on TMZ, you know, it was stated that a celebrity that's bigger than P. Diddy
his request for bail a second time, and the place where he's locked up now getting a lot of attention. The Metropolitan Detention Center, the only federal jail in New York City, is known for violence, poor conditions, and a string of celebrity detainees. And Diddy's attorneys want him out. NBC News' Yasmin Youssein has more.
From his $48 million Miami mansion to hell on earth where chaos reigns. Just some of the words used to describe the Metropolitan Detention Center where Sean Diddy Combs is now being held without bail after pleading not guilty to sex trafficking and racketeering charges.
Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct.
He is not the first high-profile inmate to pass through these walls. Ghislaine Maxwell, R. Kelly, Pharma Bro, Martin Shkreli, and crypto fraudster Sam Bankman-Fried, all as they waited for their federal criminal trials, called this jail home. But the conditions of the prison are far from homey, notoriously described as, quote, dreadful, as one judge put it. Some on the bench have even moved away from sending nonviolent defendants there. In April, a group of detainees that prosecutors said were MS-13 gang members in court documents stabbed an inmate 44 times in an attack caught on camera. 2 shivs were recovered from the attack. You see them here. The victim survived. And in the last 3 years alone, 4 inmates have died by suicide. And violence is not the only issue. Accusations of medical neglect, staffing shortages, smuggling of drugs, some allegedly facilitated by employees. At least 6 staff members charged with crimes in the last 5 years, according to the AP. Some accused of accepting bribes and providing contraband.
I've had clients describe NBC as hell, as the worst conditions they've been in.
Lance A. Clark is a federal defense attorney who's been there many times.
Michael Moore. Michael's with me now. Let's just deal with the, if you will, the logistics before we turn to the gravamen. The refusal of bail in these circumstances, bearing in mind he'd flown to New York to turn himself in, so he was preempted by the police. Are you surprised that he was refused bail?
Well, I'm glad to be with you. I'm not surprised at all. I mean, the nature of these charges are so serious, the allegations are so serious that it's not surprising that this hearing he was denied bail. The judge has to look at things like whether or not he could be expected to return to court. Does he have the manner and means to perhaps evade law enforcement and not appear? Is he a flight risk, in other words? And so I think at this point the judge has decided that the fact that he was doing these acts in secret did not obviously lend much to his statements that he will be open and available. So I'm not surprised at all. But again, we will see what the district judge now does since the case has been, or the decision has been at least appealed up, whether or not there are some terms of bail that might make the court comfortable that he will show up for court.
Now, turning to the charges themselves, they are amongst the most serious, which would involve very long periods of incarceration if convicted. But it also raises the question, if there was a plea deal at some point in the future, to plead down from these very serious charges, the lesser accepted offences would also be serious and could end up in prison.
I think any plea discussion of the case, because you have such significant impact on the victims of the case, would necessitate that he be sentenced to prison in some way. I just don't think that a judge would take and place him on probation or some type of house arrest given the allegations that were made, no matter what the plea discussions were. And remember, the prosecution and a defendant can negotiate a plea amongst themselves, but a court has the decision finally on whether or not to accept that recommendation, and ultimately has the authority to make a decision about whether or not a prison sentence is appropriate. We operate under the federal sentencing guidelines. Those give the judge some parameters to consider, things like whether or not somebody accepts responsibility, whether or not there have been an adverse impact on victims, whether or not there's been excessive fraud and deceit through the investigation of the case. Those things come into play as we talk about what might happen if there is a plea agreement that's ultimately reached.
It's important to remember, besides obviously he's innocent until proven guilty at the moment, but it's also important to remember that not being a nice person, being an unnice person, if you will, is not a crime. They're going to have to prove the elements of the offences in these cases. Just because he might not be likable is not enough to get you locked up.
Case tried in court, and the government has to prove that he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The indictment, the allegations we heard from the United States Attorney in New York, these are sordid details. They are particularly troubling as it relates to whether or not the allegations are true, on whether or not certain people, victims in the case, were given drugs at the time to get them to do these sex acts, whether or not there's been some effort to blackmail or extort or silence victims in the case by the use of videotaped, and to call it pornography would probably be too nice. I would just say dark type of pornography, it sounds like. These are things that a judge is going to have to consider as we go forward.
Finally, back to the logistics, if you will. He was prepared to turn himself in today, so we understand. The arrest removed from him the almost right to bail. Since I was going to turn myself in, I'm entitled to bail if I'd had turned myself in. By arresting him, the prosecution removed that possibility.
Well, they certainly removed the argument for him to make that he had turned himself in. It's mighty hard to, when you fly into town on a jet and you're there, to argue that there's no possible way you could be a flight risk. And that's one of the things the judge would consider. Another thing would be the nature of the charges, the allegations that were made. They spanned a long period of time. There were efforts to influence witnesses, it sounds like. At least that's been an allegation that has been made. These are all things that get put into that decision. The fact that he just would have turned himself in, that would have been in his favor. But there are so many other factors at play that it wouldn't have surprised me to see a court dig into those a little bit in making a decision on whether bail would be appropriate. And at this stage, a judge has determined that bail is not appropriate. He has a right, and has done apparently so, to appeal that decision and have another hearing on it. at that time his lawyers would have a chance to make these arguments about the efforts that he was making to cooperate and to get there. The term cooperation, frankly, sometimes gets to be a little loosey-goosey.
From his $48 million Miami mansion to hell on earth where chaos reigns. Just some of the words used to describe the Metropolitan Detention Center where Sean Diddy Combs is now being held without bail after pleading not guilty to sex trafficking and racketeering charges.
Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct.
He is not the first high-profile inmate to pass through these walls. Ghislaine Maxwell, R. Kelly, Pharma Bro, Martin Shkreli, and crypto fraudster Sam Bankman-Fried, all as they waited for their federal criminal trials, called this jail home. But the conditions of the prison are far from homey, notoriously described as, quote, dreadful, as one judge put it. Some on the bench have even moved away from sending nonviolent defendants there. In April, a group of detainees that prosecutors said were MS-13 gang members in court documents stabbed an inmate 44 times in an attack caught on camera. 2 shivs were recovered from the attack. You see them here. The victim survived. And in the last 3 years alone, 4 inmates have died by suicide. And violence is not the only issue. Accusations of medical neglect, staffing shortages, smuggling of drugs, some allegedly facilitated by employees. At least 6 staff members charged with crimes in the last 5 years, according to the AP. Some accused of accepting bribes and providing contraband.
I've had clients describe NBC as hell, as the worst conditions they've been in.
Lance A. Clark is a federal defense attorney who's been there many times.
Now, if the government is going to mandate that they are responsible for your well-being, they have to ensure the safety of your well-being.
Occupy the streets until they get heat.
In the winter of 2019, protests over a power outage left inmates without light or heat for a week in the cold.
I understand how cold it must be in those cells, and not to have any electricity, any lights, and to not be able to communicate with your family is just inhumane.
The prison has about 1,200 detainees and is the only federal prison in the nation's largest city. The DOJ shut down New York City's other federal jail, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, back in 2021, 2 years after Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide there. A Bureau of Prisons spokesman telling NBC News they, quote, take seriously addressing the staffing and other challenges at MDC Brooklyn, adding, the director appointed an urgent action team, and they've increased staffing.
The MDC has historic.
If true, this would be a bombshell revelation about one of the most influential figures in hip-hop.
Tremendous problems, and the problems aren't resolved.
Combs' lawyers originally hoping he could await trial under house arrest at his mansion, now arguing for him to be moved to a prison in New Jersey in the lead-up to this trial, citing the prison's poor conditions, violence, and deaths. On Wednesday, his lawyer said he was being held in a special housing unit with an extra level of security.
Yasmin's back with us now. So what is next? Is he going to be in jail in this facility until the trial begins? Is there a chance he could, get moved earlier than that?
As of this moment, as of this hour, as of today, yes. But of course, as I mentioned earlier, they're going to be appealing this thing next to the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals to overturn the judge's order here to try and get him actually released to his mansion on $50 million bail, wanting a GPS monitoring system, limited visits from family members, friends, so on and so forth. That is what they're proposing because of course, the violence I talked about in that piece inside these jail walls. They also, in the meantime, Hal, want to get him moved to a jail and or prison in New Jersey. The judge so far has essentially said that is up to the Bureau of Prisons to make that decision. Nonetheless, it's all going to be on appeals leading up to the trial. His next court appearance, by the way, October 9th. So looking for that, of course, and any decisions coming out from the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals on this order.
Mogul Sean Diddy Combs will try for the 3rd time to get bail today while he awaits trial on sex trafficking and racketeering charges. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller is live in New York City where this hearing happened earlier today. Alex, there was already a hearing earlier this week looking at notes taken out of Sean Combs' cell. How could that impact his chances at bail? His team says that raiding his cell, monitoring his calls, is not allowed and not fair to allow him to prep for a trial.
You know, it'll be interesting to see if this ends up happening. We just got out of this hearing, nearly 2 hours long, and they only talked about these notes at the very beginning. They discussed essentially whether or not they said the word legal on them, and there was a bit of a discrepancy from the defense. Essentially, they backtracked on this even just a little bit. Essentially, he has these binders, legal pads that, according to the photographs from the raid on his cell, did not say the word legal. All of a sudden, now they do. And the defense couldn't exactly say when the word legal was written, and that matters because if it said legal on any of these notes, that is part of attorney-client privilege. Those are things that should not have been taken out of his cell. So there is a big question about that. But Nate, the bigger issue here now is he going to get out? As of tonight, he is still going back to his jail cell. But next week, we will know whether or not he is going to be able to get out until his trial. So the big discussion here, according to the government, is can they trust him? He has proposed a whole laundry list of things that he's willing to do if they'll let him out. Things like 24/7 security, things like not speaking to anybody, not having internet access, phone access, unless it's through this 24/7 security company. But the government and pretrial services, who is separate from the prosecution, they're not buying it. They're saying that they cannot trust Sean Combs to not follow the law or to not follow the rules that he has even set out for himself. They say because he's already broken the rules that the department, the Bureau of Prisons, and his own counsel have laid out for him within a jail cell. So they're essentially saying if he can't do it there, how could he do it in the comfort of an apartment? They had tried to get him released to Star Island, his home on Star Island right in Miami, because it's an island and there's a dock there. The judge immediately said absolutely not, because in theory he could. But his defense team has now proposed instead is bringing him to an Upper East Side apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment where they say they would have 2 security guards inside of his apartment at all times, 1 downstairs. Again, the judge has not really said whether or not he is keen on this. He didn't really disclose if he's leaning one way or another, but he did ask a lot of questions about what that would look like. Again, the government not buying it, as well as pretrial services, which is the organization, the department that would have to make sure that everything was on the up and up.
Yeah, Alex, I wonder also, whether there was discussion of that now infamous video back from 2016 of Combs beating his girlfriend at the time, Cassie, the entertainer. Did that get discussed at all in the hearing today?
It did, because the defense is saying that the prosecution basically took the video that CNN originally published and gave it to the judge in that exact form, which is that it was edited down and they say out of order. They say essentially that the video ends with Cassie being dragged back to the room. They say that's not how it happened. They say it's important to know that that is not how it happened. But according to the defense, they say, or according to the government rather, they say it doesn't really matter because what you can see is what happened there. Her getting beaten up, her getting kicked, all of these violent things in nature. And what I don't think has been reported enough is that the allegation here isn't just that it was a squabble between the two of them, that it was the defense calls a lover's quarrel, but that inside the hotel room down the hallway, that there was a male sex worker there that was part of these freak-offs. So it's not just about the abuse that happened in the hallway, but the prosecution wants to bring this into evidence because of what was actually happening inside of that hotel room. Now, the defense maintains that that wasn't the case. They maintain that the fight actually happened because he was just trying to get his phone and clothing back. But even still, this video was even used today in the discussion about how violent they believe Sean Combs is and why he cannot be released on bail.
Yeah, Alex, I read about 90% politics all day long, but I mean, this is one of the stories that, breaks through, especially coming from the entertainment industry. Such a big entertainer for such a long time. Safe to say that this story not going anywhere anytime soon.
Mother Janice Combs has spoken out for the first time since this arrest. She released a statement. It reads, "It is heartbreaking to see my son judged not for the truth, but for a narrative created out of lies. My son is not the monster they have painted him to be, and he deserves a chance to tell his side. Joining us to talk about it here on The Factor Uncensored tonight, we have defense attorney and former Harris County prosecutor Vioja Akingbala, Harris County Precinct 1 trafficking director Kathy Griffin-Grignon, and radio personality J Mac from 97.9 The Box. Glad to have you all here on The Factor Uncensored. So, J Mac, when you hear that there could be more people out there, more celebrities, right, who are already settling cases quietly, are you surprised? Are you shocked?
That's a smart thing to do. You don't want us in your business. You don't want to be on the Isaiah Factor.
On the morning show, right?
On the morning show. And then you heard his mom. She's doing what a mom is supposed to do. If you pay my bills, I would say, hey, that's not the guy I know.
But then again, of course, you don't treat your mother that way. You may not tell your mother what's going on.
Come on, man. His mama know. Oh, his mama
Trust
know.
me.
I'm being naive. The naivete is showing tonight.
Your mom is gonna always know what you're doing. You might think she don't know, but she know.
Got it. Vioja, let's talk about some of the celebrities, which no names have been named as of yet, who may have settled these cases. Is that the prudent, smart thing to do?
I think considering that these civil cases are closely tied to the federal case that Diddy's facing, it's certainly a smart thing to do to perhaps try to get your name out of the public eye